a good round.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone ready?
Yep.
Yes.
I got
Oh,
You said it.
yeah. Everyone good?
Yeah,
Cool. Cool. The advantage is warming subsidies significantly contribute to warming 3 eternally serious impact at all 17 subsidies actually negative price emissions, encouraging industry high investment in extraction and increased level production, undermines competitiveness, renewable energy efficiency, alternatives, governments will make shipping way more expensive, shipping will cost 4 times as much, otherwise with subsidies are particularly important for large volume projects that anchor the fossil fuel system once capital intensive investments are made, the strong incentive to continue directing government support, increase the risk of asset trading, and sometime prior to end economic life, renewable earn an economic return support, it's given artificial life upon action that would not be found without subsidies. They substantially impact U.S. emissions. Ericsson and all 17 subsidies in approximately 17 billion barrels of oil, gas extraction to cover a total 20% contribute 17 billion CO2 emissions equivalent to 1% of global carbon dioxide. All sectors of all economies said responsible for 20% U.S. share of oil production in 2015 cost efficient virtual limited warming 2C. It's the best study. Ericsson and all 17 are now analysis plus enhancement of power CCC detailed fuel data and simulate the impact of product suite on industry decision making. Climate change is linear. Any reduction of emissions is necessary to limit immense suffering. Wassels 19 it's also global warming is not yes no it gets worse over time. Next they contain more warming, more suffering, less warming, less suffering at 2 degrees. Ice sheets clouding 50 degrees. The all conventional decarbonization our best case scenario meaning 2 degrees genocide makes better than 3 which ones have the European permanent drought. African drought for the last 5 years come refugees would grow 20-fold. Warming causes extinction. Shooting Robothon 17 warming in excess of 5 degrees plus existential risk criteria for risky climate change. Ecosystem species union first is 7.35 is the threshold tipping point for roughly irreversible climate change. For but accidental risk to human 60s coming by ocean acidity with 90% of species due extinction climate change forced by rivers left us water bleeding food scarce motives categories warming is existential. Plan the Supreme Court of the United States should invalidate the United States production and consumption subsidies for fossil fuels. That's the whole rest wrong at all. 18 fossil fuel subsidy means financial contribution provides a benefit for fossil fuel production or consumption. A slew of test cases now that challenge fossil fuel subsidies, which makes rulings ripe and justiciable. As has my written wave legal challenges watching over the oil and gas industry and accountability to state knowledge and investigation acts on 9 states fossil fuel companies finding governments have obligations to safeguard the environment, litigation potential reshape energy production industries not induced or economic cost factor within bearing the concentration with New York Mass and the Virgin Islands launch investigations. Agencies filed civil lawsuits litigation last on public trust and stress that the government told them resources federal case against change government programs and subsidized lawsuits scheduled for trial by the Supreme Court. The solvency is renewables. The plan decarbonizes the economy, reduces foreign energy dependency, kickstarts the renewables revolution. As Moines on 19 painting out subsidies reduces production of pension, full fossil subsidy economy experience the highest unemployment, lowest capital accumulation, are fully financed via taxation, pressing on the investment country needs to import raw materials and fossil fuels, carbon intensive economy, and output of the reforming subsidy in high income country, foster table low carbon energy, positive socioeconomic effects, phasing out of fossil subsidies should be shifted to investments to low carbon energy reduction and elimination ushers in an era of carbon consciousness. RA 19 U.S. government and that's all probably existing fossil fuel sector drive fossil fuel extraction to use subsidies are results are actually achieve fossil fuels. The government will stop having to use oil production and powerful subsidy represent absolute renewable energy by artificially increasing relative costs, limiting these payments, bringing out change in fossil fuel investment from the production of reducing GHG emissions, concerning extraction, hold the balance between fossil fuel infrastructure, investments on carbon being researched to be employed in building green economy, limiting corporate heads, raise fossil fuel prices, while produced through rapid decarbonization of the U.S. Growth of renewables is inevitable. The current transition collapses fossil fuel asset valuation without solving warming. Only the plan can both avoid dangerous warming and insulate investors. Harvey 18 asset in fossil fuels currently a value short term in the value of fossil fuels causes volatile reverse levels like more 20-35 millimeter plan on stronger policy events attack me. Low carbon more restricted people stop putting funds in fossil fuels. They may limit their loss of trading false assets. May have without any policy. They can't avoid the situation by ignoring Paris transition for time to so they have the worst effect of climate change to help investors by pointing deflation before they make investments in fossil assets. Renewables are feasible and solve warming. That's Burns 18 transition is feasible against electricity as foreign policy interest by undermining oil. Others will follow America's solar world's only to requiring renewables relies on fossil fuels and its power can drive down renewable energy prices so much it makes sense for us to switch away from hydrocarbons, oil and natural gas. Problem with authoritarian state creates security challenges right here to take to society over less than cutting more waste oil increase carbon price use and manage fossil wealth and control power Russia around renewable techs become cheaper rapidly no major technological percentage of parties practically by more with tech team and cheaper leading death pile of fossil fuel prices. America's lead will push renewable energy to slow climate change reduce conflict flashpoint. Skip the modeling step for now. Framework the standard is maximizing expected well-being. First is actor specificity. Governments must activate these are policies benefit some and harm others. The only non-arbitrary way to prioritize by helping the most amount of people. Actor specificity comes seriously different names have different ethical obligations as MAC 4. When the decision involves more other issues have to be considered by IFC made us work the most advantageous policy to decide more expensive one mean less for another means scarcity of resources, ethics, social harassment, justifiable standards for resolution, interpersonal conflicts. The question should maximize welfare policy solely in terms of resulting utilities. 2. Phenomenal introspection is most epistemically reliable historical moral disagreement over internal conception of morality, such a question of race, gender, class, religion, etc. Prove the fallibility of non-observational based ethics. Introspecting means you value happiness, but you can determine that each value is just same sort of elements here unless we can make those judgments about happiness. 3. Distinction outweighs under any framework. Farmer 15 reaching out service the most important thing in the whole world, so many people exist in the future, only controlling reaching out service the most important, even if the well-being being those possible people can only 0.001% as much weight which ought to take account moral uncertainty for only 1% for well-being matters for moral uncertainty reducing accident risk. The most important thing in the whole world, all minimally plausible moral peace to ensure we should try to save the world. Fourth, no intent foresee distinction. If we foresee a consequence, it becomes a part of our liberation, which makes it intrinsic to our actions since we intended to have it. Fifth, lustful prerequisite warming precludes the ability for moral actors to effectively act upon other moral theories and certain constant state of crisis that inhibits the ideal moral condition for other theories presuppose, which means by offense turns and outweighs under their framework. Six, philosophical abstraction rationalizes the status quo and threats effective mobilization against racism. That's Korean 18 philosophy hates the death of 78 people in the U.S. academic philosophy extraction the anti-black racism populism so rationalizes disposable flesh that these replants philosophical general that does away with direct policy many hours death with you who makes people emerge against the interest that their thoughts towards others philosophy and interpretation rational individual terms complexity of anti-black racism plunges into analyze racism problem of miscommunication misunderstanding eagerness our words cutting edge recent racism problems recognition as white philosopher made himself their contribution apathy of what he recognizes to the death of black Americans and race neutral theories that well raised we differentiate bodies cast reason that human as the kidneys dollars when the ultimate that takes the conscious little effect of restructuring psychology white individuals remedying institutional reasons article to be residents have not to amend the master and benefitable transition but rebuild obstacles that indicates perennial failure. Oppression is normatively bad, excludes people from moral deliberation, makes them victims of violence. Either A, impacts matter to your firm, or B, it can't condemn oppression, and you should reject it. 7, reject How candidates. 8 point empirically ignite both individuals and policymakers carry an effective cost-benefit analysis from these, even if decisions aren't always perfect, still better than not acting at all. B point theory, the functionally names that everyone knows. They're silly, but see the app and move debate away from the topic and actual philosophical debate, killing valuable education. 8, nothing the app triggers presumption of permissibility that they should affirm. 8 point the skewed format 1 say answer 7 minutes of offense and hedge against a 6 minute 2 reflex that they can't prove the app also presuming true. B point you presume statements are true unless proven false. I tell you many is correct, you believing unless you have evidence the contrary. C point presuming statements are false and impossible. You can't operate in the world if you can't trust anything. We hear D point triggers skill substantive education force on 1 area research. You should punish them for making a debate about that. E point don't evaluate presumption of permissibility. There's always a 1% risk of offense and truth testing makes it rules to constrain discussion of race and the status quo is just plain wrong over in Scotland 15. Following evidence proves they can disrupt the topic other one eventual languages for force world about justice when we implicitly justice have no value develops the way to make it home or argument to create rules and game it to character justify pros with affirmative negative are insufficient use universal wisdom sort of reserve points for these theory and centers limit is condition they should exclude these. Market at exclude these.
Starting now. So the first piece of evidence you read, it starts with the evidence. It talks about asset handling. Can you explain that?
Talks about what?
It's assets training.
Assets training, yeah, that's substantiated further by the Harvey evidence. Basically what happens is in the status quo, the sort of valuation that investors place on fossil fuels is vastly over what it should actually be because it doesn't take into account the fact that likely before 2035 the world is going to shift to renewables because like the world will kind of be forced to realize that fossil fuels are unsustainable and advances in technology will make them not would make fossil fuels not competitive anymore, which means that there'd be all these investments in fossil fuels that would suddenly just like completely crash, which would collapse the sort of
evidence talks about how there's a 5, like there needs to be 3 to 5 degree warming. Does that mean does the app solve for like 3 to 5 degrees of warming?
Yes.
Where does it say that? Where do you say voting affirmative removing subsidies would like solves 3 degrees of warming?
Our evidence indicates renewables solve warming.
So the app offense is relying on a transition to renewables.
I think even if we don't win, like transition to renewables is inevitable. The app speeds up that transition, so I'm like kind of confused. But like, if you win, like the app does nothing to change fossil fuel production, yes, the app wins solve.
Okay, can you explain the test case in front of the Supreme Court on subsidies?
What do you mean?
Can you explain the test case that your Solvency Act references in the Supreme Court?
The app doesn't specify a test case.
No, there's only one test case your evidence even talks about that is in relation to fossil fuel subsidies, the last line or the last paragraph that you highlighted.
The app does not specify a test
No.
case.
Can you explain the test case that your evidence is referencing? I'm not asking you to specify
case?
what a test case is. Rather, like you cut this evidence, so presumably you do.
Yes.
What
So like people were like suing and saying that the like federal government isn't taking necessary action by maintaining subsidies and not taking action on the
Can
climate.
you just like explain the scenario of the test case?
The what?
Can you explain the scenario of the test case, like what exactly the test case constitutes, who it's between, etc.?
I don't know like exactly who it was between.
Okay, that's fine.
But like our evidence indicates that there have been suits going on in the status quo which proves that the plan like it isn't.
The util framework, you say the intent for sentencing argument. So like if I'm like a whistleblower and the government doesn't kill my family, should I whistleblower the government? If I can foresee that as a consequence of my action.
If you think it's likely that the government is going to kill your family and you think killing your family is more important than sharing the information.
So is that like something that's made relative to the agent? It's like do I as a person get to decide if my family is more valuable than like something supposed to the government, or is that something like objective that your family decides for the person?
I mean, my framework isn't about like in the context of individuals making those decisions, but it would say that whichever action would like maximize pleasure and minimize pain would be good.
Okay, but it's not based on the individual then, right? It's like an objective question of whether or not you should whistleblow.
I don't know what you mean by an objective question of whether you should whistleblow.
Okay, that's fine. Questions normally with that arguments. If your impact is extinction, why is that not a form of abstraction that your evidence criticizes?
Warming causes massive structural violence too.
Okay. I just want to clarify that does the extinction impact have like any weight granted that you just said we should care about structural impacts?
We can care about both existential impacts and structural impacts. Our argument is that our extinction impact causes massive amounts of structural violence, which is another reason it should be prioritized.
It'll be NCAC, the F, starting with the framework. Actually, wait, sorry, it's 3 off because I don't even know what I'm saying. And sorry, the F will start in the framework. And if I get time, I'll read the parts sentence.
So, sorry, where on the case are you starting?
From
Cool. You said 3.
3 in the case. Oh, and it says negate hyphen deny the truth of. I will extempt this argument because I have the definition memorized. I will send out the definition of the citation after the
Care.
Is that okay with you?
You don't have to send it out.
Alright, is everybody good? No? Okay.
Oh, sure.
You good? Alright, everybody, anybody not ready then? Cool. To negate means to deny the truth of this is two implications. First, you presume negative more reasons why receiving might not be true than one's directly previous statement. Second, permissive clauses has spirit and proves them to obligations that would audit tells proving not proving obligations distinct from obligation negate. Now, status quo ethics demands a duality of structural ideas and mechanic analysis. The world's constantly oscillating between the poles of chaos and order that only particular view of ethics and answers complexity are not returning plus chaos must destroy the also human chaos and complexity. There is a linear progression linear towards actualization forms of erected. The world's constitution there is chaotic. This government chaos not the structure but rather ontological homogeneous and relatively destroying the state's relation would never fix it. Decentering codes of chaos make material sensation. We expect to change extra both less amounts of rest and use for gender stratification society, increase awareness of fine-tuning and potential transcendency, dominance, versus value, structure, inaugurating adaptability, creative freedom, required to confront global problems. The knowledge of the world comes from involvement in it, constantly searching and questioning philosophical truth only come from pragmatic inquiry. That hijacks ethical models and depend on the NCA Hickman. Knowing it's not just an impression on experimental involvement, there's no knowledge in general, but the production of knowledge. We live in a world of perilous and being tuned out. We have to keep tuning out. Turning out one of the most important concerns of turning out methods. One of the most important concerns of philosophy, not epistemology, but inquiry, increasing the amount of experimentation. We want to demystify ideals and treat them as tools, but it's understood the entities are tools and then part of the products of tool will be understood that they are open and reconstruction. Essence, ideals should be treated as not as absolute and fixed, but instead as just more artifacts arising from inquiry. All acceptable inquiries productive of new outcomes that are more secure than the situation that appears to inquiry that produce them. Thus, the standard consistent with pragmatic particularity, moral judgment, not collapse util. It's required to the structure of moral action, not its consequence. Includes the prefer rules cannot secure their own application. Applying new norm to a new situation is indeterminate. If you see the sequence 2, 4, 6, then you might think the next number is 8 or 10 based on different possibilities. You can try to explain that what you mean, but all language is defined by social rules built on past teachers. There's no secure foundation. Hijacks and nonsense that abstract theorizing cannot be applied to different circumstances. Proven by the Gator problem. Imagine Max is looking for a tent striking. He has a good reason to believe it is in a certain location. Also, imagine Max is not the reason left in the court. What he finds if it, in his cause after his beliefs. Here's the problem. Chapman, what is he contradicting to claim Max does his record in the closet, whereas record back at the court. Max believes that his record is in the closet and he may be wrong. He might even have good evidence that his record is in the closet, nonetheless be wrong in some. None of these we would say Max knows where his record is. Suppose if Max just guesses that his closet, even if he guesses incorrect, Max will having true belief has an unjustified belief and does not have knowledge. Now negate first elimination and divorce energy hardships for a transition period. It's more challenging for low-income households to adapt to fluctuating energy pricing, utility hardships, and major press for low-income families. Shutouts and extreme home temperatures with significant health impacts, including respiratory illness and pneumonia, increased fire risk, bronchitis, and hunger, and stress. The second is the affirmative negates. It's a blanket statement that wills a wholesale elimination of all fossil fuel subsidies, which is not consistent with the particular view of ethics, because ignores specific circumstances that might dictate otherwise. Next off, this set, surprise. Environmental protection is a political question, not jurisdiction. The courts act constitute violations by forcing courts to take an implicit stance on climate change and environmental protection. Shapiro, 10, the political question excludes controversies around policy choices. The judiciary illustrates courts that are fundamentally under formula matters not legal in nature to for contest and scientific and policy choices well before political branches have decided upon any standard of care to will require the court to making the requirement determination will require the court to decide if warming is a phenomenon, whether and the extent of which it is man-made and whether it contributes to intensity global and the global weather events. Recognizes non-justice bill protects courts from decisions of the kind which the judiciary has neither aptitude facilitates no responsibility. Broad policy questions raised are the type that political branches are engineered to answer, and the judiciary is specifically designed to be bad at. PQ violation of crush global coordination necessary to solve climate change independently turns the F. Tribe 10. Abundantly, the foundation for groundbreaking international overhaul American energy policy disastrous. Courts were to beat by Congress to the punch and begin solutions to climate problems in form of legislation, resolution, judicial action require costly time, change of prior existence of ad hoc mismatch of common law for regimes will frustrate the legislature attempt to design current solution to even the effective operation legislatively created regimes by artificially constructing the side the market when courts decide the important limitations that the PQD imposes upon judicial power, then the constitutional government will suffer. Next up, this set again, surprise. A reference to renewables that privately planning accounts of resources in multiple hotspots and Brazil 18. The global transition to clean energy creates new challenges. Clean energy metals are constantly certain areas subject to contest over their control. The clean energy risk of multiple forms of conflict operates of with weak institutions, competition and global commerce, privatization of minerals. GRC produces 60% of coal. An increase in demand. The Arctic Ocean SCS would further intensify conflict, but contain metal deposits exploration. Can drive countries to their claims forcefully. Beijing has a sea mining capacity which will contribute to the control of the seabed. China has a willingness to validate sovereign claims. Conflict would aggravate these disputes. Arctic war draws in great powers, nuclear. Current 19. The research region involves Arctic country. The fight for research region involves Arctic countries and China. Russia is rapidly increasing their military presence. Other states are doing the same. Different constitutes any conflict existing parts of risk of nuclear war. NATO is still interested in the Arctic. On one side, US and Norway, Canada. On the other side, Russia, China. Every developed country has an interest in the Arctic. Any consideration in the Arctic Ocean will be similar to the Persian Gulf War. The SCS, however, all Arctic players are nuclear powers with major capabilities or military alliances. Cut the evidence alliances. The affirmative, the framework proper. I hijack their ethical model. You can see the consequences of the matters. Question: what orientation becomes towards consequential? Something should be based on the particularity, moral judgments, aggregation necessary when it comes to every single world. Governments need to be able to control their actions. Just with people, this is proven by the fact that we don't tax people universally, but rather have taxation and then tax breaks etc. based on what individuals' particular circumstances are they. No good for the phenomenal respect argument. One egoism disputes just because I introspect pleasure does not mean I do pleasure. Second is that masochism disputes people feign pleasure from playing. Third is that it just justifies a value theory. I like ice cream does not mean I want to maximize ice cream consumption. They say extinction comes first. You can greet this with less priority. One is because it's intrinsic, not instrumental, not intrinsic moral obligation. For example, we need oxygen being this round. Does not mean the standard is maximizing oxygen comes out. And second is assumes the standard itself. It assumes the validity of calculating such consequences. Third is not discern. For example, having could be ethical certainty, which would mean it would necessarily be good. They say oppressions matter in the affirmative would say that we should keep about big six scenarios. Big scenarios or more which means it wouldn't make sense. But also it's a question of what impacts matter more. They say reject calculation. Nice to know. It's a question of if your framework actually makes sense. If it's not governments do not use them because governments do not use them. They're just using something as bastardized form of utilitarianism. The presumption permissibility or the debate argument. The presumption permissibility. My arguments at weight 8 point is substantive theoretical justification presumes substance is tied in the first place, which means that if I want a substantive justification, it would come first. B point his argument does not make sense. It's a question question of probabilistic claims. We only believe your name is Rex, but if you said your name was Tej, people would probably assume that your name is not Tej, which is what your speech doc says, which means I do not believe you, Rexter. See, point is that there's not one risk of offense. If there's a terminal defense conceding from that means you should vote a presumption because there's no other risk. There's otherwise a risk that something's worse, which is empirically proven. I'm pretty sure that's what happens in policy debates. I presumption flows negative. The advantage. I'm going to read some part in the doc. No effect on emissions. IASI 18. Removing subsidies would only small effect of CO2 emissions. Renewable use by 2030 would only be 1.5% lower than subsidies had maintained. The removal of subsidies causes more emission intensive the rate per unit energy is not high enough to affect global energy demand. Where subsidy removal would not be renewable use because it's changed cheaper to reduce energy demand. Substitute fuels from renewables. That numerous barriers make fossil fuel consumption inevitable regardless of economic sense and rental. And Brazilian 17. Urban consenting the effectiveness of carbon fuel taxes cut in half fuel prices increase people will between blend fossil fuel and private transport. There are no alternatives. These subsidies reduce and fuel prices increase significant barriers make households or firms unable or willing to adjust their behavior. These barriers may include information capacity, financial constraints, FS performance low interest and complexity of existing markets and government failures that hijinks their arguments. Their arguments talk about specifically how the reasons why we would shift your renewables is the question of whether or not we would be able to entirely shift your renewables, which is what the affirmative would demand if they eliminate subsidies and if their solvency has any credence. Otherwise, for speeding the shift of renewables as an increase in solvency, where we think we are changing political has actually created something more than what it is necessarily not. Now I'm going to read the paradox of the last argument evidence the F. As a model becomes more complex, it becomes less understandable to the point where if useless and how as a model becomes less realistic by definition wouldn't reflect the real world. English Article 13, all models break down whether physical, mathematical, or long-word determination. No model can completely describe an object. It says you try to make the model more accurate. What if you need more accurate information? There's even more clutter. You need an expert to interpret the information. Eventually reach a degree of accuracy that makes it easier to strike out your own. The less information a model carries, the less useful it's going to be. And the more information a model carries, the less useful it's going to be in helping someone who may understand any single point, which proves the affirmative self-defeating. You should negate. Independently, 5 degrees doesn't solve. It's a question of like, would do the creative rules solve? They do, but negative. Yeah.
The NC, how do we determine whether something is particular or not?
Sure. So I think the argument is like the idea of like blankets saying something is good or something.
What determines if I say slavery is always bad, is that not particular enough?
No, I think the Hickman evidence would answer this objection. It says that we require pragmatic inquiry and experimentation, which requires.
So we need to experiment with slavery to know that's bad.
No, I think you're misunderstanding my argument.
So I guess how do we know that as an objective statement
slavery is bad? Yes, I think slavery is probably not pragmatic. It prevents our ability to engage in experimentation.
So something that prevents your ability to engage in experimentation should be prevented?
Well, the argument is that denies access to the idea of experimentation. The Arno evidence would also.
So why doesn't warming deny access to the idea of experimentation?
Sure. So I think you can make that argument. The question is whether or not the AF meets this principle. You can make terms to the NC and say the AF is good for experimentation. The question is the AF particular though? I'm giving you a framework justification.
So I guess how do we determine how particular?
Let me finish.
Sure.
Your offense may link to a framework justification. That does not mean your offense links to the framework. There's a distinction.
So I guess why, if the AF was slavery bad, why would it that?
Would probably not negate.
Why not?
I would need to prove an instance in which slavery is good, which does not exist.
So, if you prove one reason why subsidies are good, that's sufficient to negate?
No, it's a question of whether or not, the orientation of the IA blanket statement is good or not.
How do you determine, what constitutes a blanket statement?
Yeah.
If I was, the app, as a framework for evaluating different actions, i.e., if the plan was, get rid of, this one coal lease in, the middle of Antarctica, would that be a particular enough statement?
Yeah, probably particular enough.
How do we determine what's a particular enough statement?
It's not a blanket statement insofar as I see specific cause and effect of, what the app is and, what it solves. This is, a blanket ban necessarily ignores certain particularities that when it comes to subsidy usage.
What particularities does it ignore?
Sure, the transition period, for example.
Why wouldn't eliminating in the Arctic also cause the transition period?
It would cause a transition period for people in the Arctic.
So does that mean it's not particular enough?
I don't know how many people live in the Arctic.
So it's based on how many people it affects?
No, point blank, there's just 0 people in the Arctic to my knowledge, right? And,
or not the Arctic, whatever, Nebraska, somewhere there are people.
I'm sorry, from my point, Nebraska's not a state.
Kansas, I don't know.
No, still fails the test, sorry.
California. Or are you just gonna troll us CX and learn
I don't know, I'm considering. So can you explain the question again? Sorry.
Alright, so assuming it's not in the Arctic and it's somewhere where there are people and there would be Trump transition effects.
It depends. If for example, lighting affects people in California, then probably not particular enough.
The PQD disad, what current initiatives solve warming that any PQD stops?
The argument is it makes it actively worse. It's not a question of whether or not I stop the one EC's.
How does the AF make it worse? Or what's the warrant? I guess what specific actions are taken that worsen warming?
Sure. So the Tribe 10 evidence says no. The Tribe 10 evidence says putting a Supreme Court precedent means that it stunts Congress's ability to pass legislation that actually creates actual climate change. The judiciary's only job is to interpret what the law says, but the Congress passes bills in accordance with those laws, right? That is what motivates government to act or launches initiatives.
Okay,
the Supreme Court ruling that that's process I won't listen.
4 minutes.
want that negate means to start.
No, that's fine. Does anything in the, what, besides like the paradox you read at the end, does anything else trigger presumption?
The paradox only triggers presumption on the app flow. What is, like, triggers presumption? Like, if you read channel defense to the NC, I guess I could potentially give a presumption, but, like,
Okay.
there's nothing that says, like, the app triggers.
There's like no like
automatically.
other like calc index or anything, right?
What is it? Like, no, there's an argument that says, like, we can't use turbulence.
What was that argument?
It's the combination of the Gettier problem and the rules can't secure their application.
Why can't we use consequentialism?
So it gives an example of math. If I say 2, 4, 6, the next time.
Like I get that. Like why does that mean we can't use
Well, we
util?
can't use the test to justify what the next pattern is because it's deductive.
So like, can I know that like, if I'm like have my fist and I'm like throw it forward at you, that it's not going to hit you?
You don't know that, yeah.
I don't know that.
I've
So how do we know that? Wait. So how do we know that passing the AF causes a transition like problems?
How do we know the app causes a transition period is the better question we should be
Or
asking.
how do you know the AF causes a transition period if we don't know like anything that's going to happen in the future based
Well, I
on
think
the
this is
past?
an argument that indicts your ethical thinking.
Like how does it not indict your ethical
Because
view?
that justifies judgments being particular in nature intrinsically, right? If you concede that there's no transition period, I think that just means like particularism still making this. Like if we don't know what the consequences of the app are, it seems unintuitive to pass a blanket statement, granted we like know literally nothing about the app.
So like, do we know like if I enslave someone that's not bad because we can't use the past to inform the future?
No, the argument of slavery in an action in and of itself is always bad. It's not based on what happened in the past, but rather like the process of slavery itself is bad.
Okay. 132 left?
Is there any-
No. Case in the order of advantage, then framework. The PQD just had, the REM just had the NC. Doc was sent that way.
Can you repeat the order, sorry?
Case in the order of advantage framework. The disads in the order PQD REM. That's
Are we good?
Not yet.
Vikram?
Hello.
Good?
Oh my god, I'm sorry. Did you give a speech? Or you gave a speech? False.
Okay, everyone good? Glad I checked.
Yeah, good stuff. Can you give an order again?
Case in the order of advantage framework.
Okay.
The PQD disad, REM disad, and C. Cool. Everyone good? Subsidies artificially raise the cost of renewables, keep declining coal and oil industries afloat the planet's fossil fuel profitability, providing financial incentive to decarbonize warming, cause extinction, biodiversity loss, acidification, resource force, and more. Their ISAS evidence doesn't assume a shift to renewables, which our evidence is better on. They consider ours is the best study because it goes into specifics of specific refineries, whereas the evidence is more general and doesn't assume marginal projects, which is what our Garrett-Centric evidence indicates is what the majority of subsidies go towards. No barriers, biofuel, salt transportation. That's Griffith teaching 19 came down with biofuels, America's and sounding biofuels can be converted to natural gas, diesel, petroleum, substitute fuel, helping to double biofuels more than achievable. The paradox is about computer science. It doesn't apply to the firm. We can still make reasonable predictions. There's no reason we need a perfect model. And util would say that try for a perfect model would cause disutility, which means we can still stop when it's reasonable to make a prediction. The framework debate all extend the Palmer evidence. No philosopher would say that high risk of extinction comes always whatever tiny philosophical impact that their framework has. That proves that intuitions that sort of come prior. Their arguments don't apply. It's not in the context of Bostrom where there's an ethical modesty claim that if there's any risk of future generations and any risk that their well-being matters, that so many people could exist in the future, and any risk they're wrong in the framework debate proves that there's not ethical certainty, which is why you should prioritize extinction. None of their other arguments apply because we're going for that. The dissent. This evidence is like 9 years old. Our evidence proves that there are cases that are being ruled on in the status quo by courts, which disproves the link in worst case sums it. The plan solves the impact there. Evidence is just like Congress wouldn't be able to pass laws in the future, but there's no reason Congress would need to pass laws in the future, given that we've won solvency that shifting renewables alone solves. The REM dissent. Renewables are inevitable, which they've conceded, which 90 weeks of the dissent that war happens inevitable, which means warming is the only impact you can solve, which was the Harvey evidence from. Yeah, REM mining doesn't cause war invasion, solves and misunderstands economics as Oberlin PhD 19 most are geologically abundant vast majority of wind turbines that contract with gear turbine technology is highly probable that effective improvements in cost reduction use shows 2010 about her innovation. We can use Chinese steel critical materials can be recycled to main increase recycling, will increase use scale economies, will reduce the cost of another commodity, and able to transcend the reality of economics, innovation, and trade. They didn't read a nuclear winter impact, so warming outweighs disease, only existential impact the NC. Pragmatism doesn't make sense for states because they have to pass laws that aren't ever changing and subject to an infinite amount of exceptions. No law is perfect, but states have to decide which ones are on balance better, which requires calculating the overall cost and benefits. Anything else criminalizes action, which was our actual specificity warrants. Some experience are bad, i.e. you shouldn't jump off a building, even if it's life affirming. Only micro contextualizes what experience are good at, those that maximize well-being. They don't have a heuristic for determining what counts as a valid experience, which was proven by CX where they had like zero explanation, just talk in circles about why specific things like slavery can be universal norm or why specific plan can be. But if it's true that all they need to do is prove that one tiny thing is wrong with the affirmative, then no proposal that would materially improve lives would ever get passed because there's always some small flaw with the proposal or some person that is hurt, i.e. policies that would stop racism would hurt people in the KKK, which proves that their framework doesn't really make sense, and the only way to resolve it is by maximizing well-being. Their framework is also self-defeating, saying all universals are bad is itself a universal statement, which causes infinite regress and paralyzes action. The limelight, there's no, or the rules can't secure their own application stuff. We can still reasonably predict consequences. That was the stuff on the case, and intuitions are able to resolve this. The fact that they made predictions about their transition period proves that there's, to some extent, you're able to make predictions about the future of the world, even if you can't determine for some mathematical reason that rules can't determine their own application. There's no bright line in of their contentions because the transition period is solved by renewables, which was all of our evidence on the case. And even if there's a slight transition period, extinction massively outweighs into the framework because it precludes the possibility for any form of experimentation in the future, which answers their blanket statement arguments. Saying some universals are good, i.e. rape or sexual assault is always bad, which is possibly general statements like the app and only assessing cost and benefits allows to determine whether or not the app is a good at universal. If you don't understand how we determine what a particular statement is after the one and see or what exactly matters underneath their framework, you should evaluate any of their impacts because tuning or recontextualization doesn't solve, and they obviously couldn't explain any of this stuff in CX, which proves you should sort of use your intuitions and error affirmative. Also extend the no intent foresight distinction, or also extend the philosophical abstraction argument there. Framework uses any form of particulars to say that policy shouldn't be passed. We would justify not abolishing slavery because the possibility of it causing backlash or a particular situation in which the relationship is good, which proves it's an abstraction away from material harms like warming.
Cool. I have
157.
yeah, sorry. What are the responses to PQ?
First, the evidence in the app that proves that there are cases that are being ruled on in the status quo thumps it. Second is there's no impact. your argument in CX was just like it prevents Congress from passing policies in the future to solve warming. But if the app solves warming, there's no need for those other policies.
It will be the, so PQD, then the F, then let's see.
On the app, is it the framework or the advantage?
The advantage and the framework.
Well, you said advantage framework or framework advantage?
Advantage framework. Everybody in?
Can I repeat that?
PQD, App Advantage, App Framework, NC.
What?
Vikram? Yeah. You can see. And I can see. Right. We're spending like 15 seconds on the disadvantage, which means I'm actually going to collapse to disadvantage. Here's a story that says climate change is becoming a partisan issue. Courts are designed to be neutral parties in the government. That's a first piece of evidence that they said the app forces a major decision about the environment that is unprecedented and would violate. They make one argument how the case is currently exists, and with them, you should read their evidence. The evidence says that the court is continuously putting off ruling on this issue, which proves the solvency of what proves the link to they just said even if they're winning, that it eventually comes to the question of when does the test case happen. You need to read their evidence. Their evidence does not say when the disadvantage act or when the case comes to court, which means that there's a risk of offense at risk of stopping our ability to roll fossil fuel right now is something essentially bad because there's still time for us to create some sort of congressional action. Their other argument is that they create a shift to renewables, which also there's solvency requires congressional bills. That is how the cost of fossil fuels and climate change are mitigated. How do we institute renewable policies? Or how do we force people to shift renewables? How do we engage in their politics that requires the congressional oversight of some sort? Even if courts rule, it's a question of should courts be ruling on this thing in the first place? The answer is no. It'll politicize debate to the point where no effective action is possible. They're also not winning the solvency debate, which I'll get to on the affirmative, which means even if they're winning some sort of marginal structural impact, it's a question of what they do, what they put off in the future, which outweighs on duration. Even if they're winning an argument, why they still mitigate some form of climate change. It's a question of the future action that they necessarily shut off, which is the reason why you should be negative. I'll extend the disadvantage proper. The first argument, the Shapiro argument, says that environmental protection is political. It's not in the jurisdiction. That's the impact is that crushes global coordination required to solve climate change. It's not even a question about the United States climate change or global climate change entirely. They might win by emissions. The United States could have. It's a question of what can solve for globally, which independently outweighs on scope. It's a question. Independently outweighs on scope. It's a question of what should be equipped for the entirety of the world that prevents warming. All their evidence is in context of subsidy elimination, generally not in context of the United States, and the shift is also in context of the United States, but not globally, which means that the game member that said the affirmative advantage. The problem is Rex is just starting with my evidence without actually reading the evidence. You should read the IASI evidence. It says, quote, removing fossil fuel subsidies would only have a small effect on CO2 emissions and renewable energy usage, which proves that there's no shift renewables for this evidence. The rate per unit advantage is not high enough on the effect of the global energy demand, which means subsidy removal would not boost renewable use. That's literally in the evidence. Rex just shadow extended evidence and not do any evidence comparison. You might prefer my evidence 8 points from the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, which means it's most reliably connected to what subsidies mean objectively. Viewpoint is that he did not do any qualification. The one year just kind of shadow extended. Oh, I solve for renewables. I promise that is not sufficient working. C points from Science Deal, which is probably C points actually skip that. I'm not good for that. Then the other piece of solvency defense, I'm also going for the rental evidence. They say they will make an argument why we should biomass solve, but they, again, read the evidence. The evidence is cites for renewable energy usage in terms of cars as one particular example. But again, the evidence talks about how increased significant barriers make households and firms unwilling to adjust their behavior. These barriers may include information, capacity, or financial constraints, which is not just about renewables, not just about biomass, which means that Rex is just straight up losing on the electric debate, which means you should not, insofar as there's solvency present, the 1 year did not respond to these arguments, did not put enough ink on these arguments. Now, they say they solve for 5 degrees of warning. You know, you cannot solve for 5 degrees of warning. You barely solve for any degrees of warning. They concede the rules of solvency argument independently, which operates as offense. Rex makes us think we've actually done something in political sphere where we actually have not, which destroys our ability to create any form of future change. Always on duration. The framework debate proper. They make two extension arguments. First is extension comes first. Too bad you conceded that extension is the instrumental impact, not intrinsic to moral obligation. Just because I need to be alive to ethically theorize does not mean I start the round from being alive. But similarly, we need auction to be in debate. That does not mean that for standards maximizing auction is obviously ridiculous. Conceded argument which means it's game over on the permanent debate. It's not a question of extinction, but rather what our ethical orientation in the first place should be. They say also it's a question of legitimizing racism. The 1 year did not extend a structural balance impact. They literally said warming caused extinction. It outweighs, which means the case outweighs the magnitude. That argument does not make sense. Granted, that you're going for these arguments about materiality. Independently particularism is where materiality means it says that combating injustice requires particular circumstances, which means only the negative framework can ever hope to solve it. Or not evidence is very good on this issue, which means yeah, I'm gonna switch to the NC flow now. Yeah. Where is the NC? Okay. The argument evidence was severely mishandled. You can see the argument says that the world is constantly oscillating. The idea of utilitarianism avoids creates some sort of objective idea of utility, pain, or pleasure, which is something that's necessarily false. Also, wait, I just realized an argument. Also, they straight up concede on the util flow that there's no such thing as pain and pleasure, which means their utilitarian theory itself is false. They should be held to a comprehensive standard. If we do not know what pain is, if pain is something that's individual, subjective, for example, masochist, or if we do not know what pleasure is, insofar as I can only entrust that my experience that is terminal defense the entirety of their theory, there must be comprehensive. How do I know death is bad? It's a question of pleasure or pain, but those arguments were not justified insofar as they did not extend the warrant for the utilitarian theory, which means phenomenal introduction. The empirical world is not reliable. Independently, they can see the Gettier problem, which means it's game over because the empirical world is straight up not reliable. It says that if Max Planck says 10 structures in the closet and goes there and finds out that even though he thought he did leave it in the closet, it does not exist. That means we cannot use the empirical world. Similarly, if I continue past a clock and I see it says 12, and every time I think I'm walking and it's at 12 o'clock, but actually the clock is broken, which means I cannot verify any circumstance in the empirical world conceded by Rex, which means no 2 years swing, except the framework the standards consist with pragmatic particularism, even if the framework tries to question what particular circumstances they have to deny the truth of the entirety of the resolution. If I win a single instance where we should not affirm the resolution and we consist with particulars, that would mean unity and affirming. They say there's no balance. They say abhorrent examples like slavery. No, that does not lead to examples like slavery. It's a question. It does not lead to slavery. It's because that would deny our ability to engage in experimentation in the first place, which is a prior question. They also say I'm creating a universal statement. No, I'm saying that each statement itself should be particular, which is a fine from universalism insofar as I'm diagnosing the starting point of ethics from the Arna evidence. And finally, yeah. So like here, I will break down the NC debate real quickly. There are lots of like random ass arguments on the line, but I need to weigh those. Granted, like arguments were conceded on the NC. Question of structuring the world, and even if all of their defensive arguments are right, they concede that my model hijacks theirs. It's a question of, even if utilitarianism is true, even I grant that plain and pleasure exists, it's a question of what do we do after that. The thing is, we need to inquire and understand and experience the world, which requires particularism because each experience is necessarily different. Extend presumption permissibly negate, the more reasons the statement might not true, the more direct the statement to permissibly negates the after-proven obligation. The Gettier problem proves that we cannot rely on the empirical world, which means only my framework is consistent. Also, just losing the PPD debate, and there's solvency deficit on the F, or terminal defense to the F, which means you can vote anything on presumption.
132. Wait, so the F only causes a 5% reduction in emissions, right?
No, the F does not cause reduction in emissions. The evidence talks about how it's less than 2%.
Wait, I thought you said 5%.
No, I was quoting your own evidence that says there's a 5% reduction. I said that is not what happens. If I won like terminal defense to the F.
No, so like I guess your evidence says 1 to 5, right? Or like how much does the F decrease emissions?
No, your evidence says 1 to 5. The argument that
I'm quoting your evidence. Like how much does the F decrease emissions?
Sorry, let me just look at the evidence. I don't know. Which evidence is ISI?
Yeah.
Yeah, by 2030 it would be 1 to 5%.
Okay.
But it switches to more emissions intensive coal. There's not enough there. These are ones that are not contested by the one.
Case, disad, and C. Or, sorry, after the disad, the like aff framework,
So wait, the app advantage, disad, app framework?
and C.
Got it.
Is everyone good?
Repeat it one more time.
Advantage, disad, aff framework, and C.
I'm good. Vikram? Cool. Renewables transition is inevitable. Even if the app doesn't speed it up all the way, it still speeds it up a little bit. 1 to 5% reduction in emissions is still huge. That global warming is the biggest impact in this debate, and they have zero mechanisms for resolving, which means any risk of, if we're running defense on the dissent, that means that any risk the case is able to outweigh. They conceded warming is on a sliding scale, which was the Wallace evidence, which was extended in the 1 year, because every increase in emissions increases the sort of linear impacts it and drastically increases the risk of extinction from warming, which means the app is still good even if we don't facilitate a complete shift to renewables independently. Their evidence is just straight up wrong. They've conceded our evidence from the 1EC is comparatively better. Our study is the best study because it goes into specific oil wells and concludes that 50% of oil production would not be profitable, whereas their evidence doesn't assume that subsidies kind of occur in marginal cases in which the fuels wouldn't be profitable, whereas it assumes that it just goes to plants that could be able to survive regardless, which means our methodology was better, which was the comparison done in the 1 area. They did none of this weighing in the 2 and R in the 1 and C, which means we obviously get new weighing in the 2 area. It's relevant because we still decrease warming by 5%. The cars and unwilling to shift stuff doesn't make any sense because our argument is that we make renewables cost competitive, and even if we don't, it still decreases consumption of fossil fuels because they'd be more expensive, which still decreases warming enough. The ruse of solvency stuff doesn't have an impact, especially if we're winning the case the dissent. The framing issue is there's zero impact to what the dissent does. What policies are Congress going to pass? What global coordination is occurring in the status quo that the U.S. that the U.S. is stopping? Their evidence is from 2010, which means it doesn't say anything. There's no terminal impact to it, and there's no uniqueness for it because warming is occurring in the status quo. None of those global measures working to the extent that they do. U.S. eliminating subsidies would solve it. The explanation, the plan, insofar as the plan solves warming or significantly decreases, you have no idea how much it decreases as a result of their nebulous impact to like causing collapse in global cooperation. It means that the case definitely outweighs. The congressional oversight stuff was new in the 2 and R, and obviously if the Supreme Court passes something, the sort of consequence of that would still be Congress enforcing it. Their evidence comes nowhere close to saying just because courts rule on something means Congress can't enforce it. It says that Congress wouldn't be able to pass policies, not that they can't enforce Supreme Court rulings, which means that it doesn't apply in the context of the affirmative. In a risk, the case still outweighs because there's zero impact to this dissent. The app framework. We do know what pain and we don't need to know exactly what pain and pleasure is. This was a blip in the 1C that was blown up. Yes, some people are masochists, but slight subjectivities don't disprove that warming is bad and causing massive amounts of suffering. The NC obviously relies on certain things being good and certain things being bad, which means even if we lose the pain and pleasure debate, we still win that the NC will collapse back into consequences, which means it still matters. The empirical world is reliable. They've conceded intuitions that way, and we can still reasonably determine that stuff's going to happen in the future. There's no reason we need to sort of use it as a clock every time, and specifically in the context of pragmatism. Pragmatism would say that we should use stuff that from inquiry we can determine can work in that sort of reliable way of making decisions, which means this argument isn't terminal defense, terminal risky case, which outweighs. I'm not going for the extinction outweighs stuff, but the NC simply just didn't have an answer to how we determine what a particular instance is. If it's true that a single instance means you negate, they conceded it's repugnant because it would justify slavery because, or not abolishing slavery, because obviously some people would be like, there would be massive backlash that could potentially harm some people, or like KKK members, which proves that their framework doesn't make any sense. And the only way that the government can ever be able to make decisions is by sort of weighing between different forms of particular consequences and determining that the case, and determining that warming is massively bigger than a few people not having energy for a little bit of time. They conceded that intuitions to sort of frame this, which takes out all of their arguments and proves that if their framework is repugnant and can't get action, the case outweighs.